This is Ed Rep Radio, presented by Eastman Music Company. This is Ed Rep Radio, a podcast to bring you ideas and information from industry experts you can use on the road every day. Presented by Eastman Music Company, and I'm your host, Shane Duell. On this episode, we'll be talking with Phil Hodapp of Beacock Music in Vancouver, Washington. Phil is arguably one of the hardest working and most successful Ed Reps on the road today, and he very graciously agreed to spend time with us about how and why he's so successful on the road. He'll give us a few tips for working with and growing relationships with teachers, advice for new Ed Reps, and a lot more. While Phil and I were talking after the interview and the audio recording had stopped, he offered what I think is one of his best pieces of advice. Surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and will help you raise the bar in your life. I couldn't agree more with Phil, which is why I think this interview and others to come will inspire you to raise your bar and your level of service as an Ed Rep. It's difficult to spend time with Ed Reps that inspire you while you're driving out there by yourself in your van, so we're bringing some of the best Ed Reps like Phil to you. Phil, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
I met you probably 15 years ago, back at my first NASMD, and you immediately made a great impression on me as someone who was incredibly dedicated to the job, one of the hardest working people I've met, and very experienced and obviously very efficient and productive at what you do out there. So I think anybody listening today will really get a lot from you, Phil, from your experience and what you do. And I just want to say we really appreciate you spending some time really just kind of sharing your story and what you do and how you do it. And it's going to be very enlightening for me and for everyone, really. So let's start with just kind of where you are in the country and how long you've been an Ed Rep.
We're in the Great Pacific Northwest. I'm based out of Vancouver, Washington. I work for Beacock Music. We have two stores, one in Vancouver, and in 2000, that would open in 1976. And in 2018, we opened a location in Eugene. We acquired a store and opened a location in Eugene. I've been doing this since May 1st of 1999. So a while.
Yeah, indeed. You've got some experience.
Mm-hmm.
So can you describe your market a little bit and the variety of the schools and areas and teachers you call on?
Sure. We cover everything pretty much south of Castle Rock, Washington, which is a little burg about 70 miles north of the Oregon-Washington dividing line, all the way down to the California border on the Washington side, and pretty much everything from the coast to the Cascades, the Cascade Mountain Range. So we have a very large geographic territory with actually a very small numeric footprint in numbers of bodies. In the entire state of Oregon, there's less than half the people than in just the Seattle metro area, for example.
Amazing. So you drive a lot.
Yes, we do.
Currently, are you the only rep with Beacock, or are there more out there as well?
I started off as the only rep. In fact, I started off with a resignation. I resigned on May 1st, 1999. And that was how I got hired. I handed in a letter of resignation. And I said, if I'm not profitable 1 calendar year from this date, then I've resigned. The letter of resignation was dated for May 1st, 2000. At that time, the store they'd had maybe 2 Ed Reps, maybe 3, but none of them had been successful to the point to where it's almost $0 going in versus expenses going out. We started with 17 schools at that point. We had 11 rental nights that first year and 17 schools.
Wow. You've grown a little since then.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just kind of added things. My philosophy is that we only go where we're invited. So there's zero cold calling to expand that territory. It's all done through personal contact, through references with other directors bringing me to the new school. We've done zero cold calling in that time.
Wow, amazing. You only go where you're invited. I want to get to more to that in a second. And just to get a sense of how much you've grown, how many accounts do you call on now?
We have just over 380 schools, I believe, right now.
Wow. So you started with, what was it, 17? And
17.
Now you're 380. Okay, well done, Phil. That's some amazing growth.
It took 20 years to get there. So I don't know if that's amazing growth or not.
Well, let's start to get into some of these details about how you got there. But before we do that, I mean, we're in such a crazy, unique time in the job of being an ed rep in schools. We're recording this in March of 2021, which is 1 year after the World Health Organization declared COVID a worldwide pandemic, and everything changed.
Yes.
And it's something on everybody's mind right now. So let's kind of start with this big elephant in the room. How has COVID affected your schools compared to the rest of the country?
I would say that our area of the country, and you could probably add somewhat California, although even California, not quite as much as us. The Oregon and Washington, that northwest corner of the country, we've literally been shut down, no in-person school the entire time. There has been zero in-person instruction. And at this point, there's been in-person instruction, but it isn't going to be until the middle of April at the earliest that we're going to have in-person band instruction of any type. And even that will be severely limited by space. They're forcing them to use 9 square feet around every kid, which means a 4,000 square foot band room can only hold 15 kids in it.
Wow.
They can only have rehearsals for 30 minutes, and then the room has to be cleared out for 30 minutes and aerated, and everything in the room that anybody might have touched has to be cleaned. So band directors now have to shoo everybody out in an orderly fashion, 9 feet apart. The band director has to spend 30 minutes cleaning all the equipment. The doors and the windows have to be open, if there are any, before the next group of 15 kids for a 4,000 square foot room can come in.
Unbelievable. What an incredible challenge for teachers to have to deal with. I think your area has definitely been more shut down than the rest of the country. And you have such a big challenge ahead of you as people pull out of this. I'm curious, how have your teachers been doing, I guess, morale-wise, and how are they keeping kids involved with band over the last year?
They're really struggling, honestly. I would say that as a whole, the band director community is probably more affected than any other community in the education world, because they've been targeted as super spreaders simply because kids blow air into instruments.
Yeah.
So even amongst the staff at their schools, they're kind of ostracized a little bit. Well, we'll get to band when we can get to band. So in addition to also having the stigma of your extracurricular, you're not core, and having to fight through that, they're also fighting through this COVID thing where people are deciding whether or not music has enough value to justify. And of course, nobody's looking at science. Science shows that all those fears are pretty much unfounded and unjustified, that very few droplets escape out of the instrument, et cetera, et cetera. So we've tried to be a part of their lives. That's how we started, and how we operate is we become a part of their lives. That's why we get invited. We don't view ourselves as a delivery service. So I have myself, and then I've got a rep in Eugene, and I've got 2 reps up here in Vancouver. So there's a total of 4 of us on the road. I'm on the road 1 day a week during peak times, and they're on the road 5 days a week during peak times. And I spend the rest of my time supporting them, doing the bids, doing all the other stuff, because my goal for them is for them to not have to do what I had to do to get this up and rolling and on the ground. I want them to be able to spend their time becoming a part of their band director's fabric of life. And they should be able to go to the school. Their stuff should be ready to go. They can load it, go to the school, fellowship, associate with the teachers, and then come back, and everything's taken care of once they take it out of the van. So we have systems that we've designed and are in place to do all that for them.
Great. And have they been able to start to do more of that, I guess, day-to-day typical duty of an ed rep with the closures,
I
or
would
is it still
love
shut
it.
down?
I would love it if they could. However,
Yeah.
we had to furlough the two
Mm,
up here. So right
okay.
now I am the road rep that
Again.
does all the schools up here plus all that stuff. And then we have our Eugene guy down there and I do all his support work and goes to the schools.
Okay.
So as things ramp back up, I'm sincerely hoping to get them back on the road as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. So over the last year, how have you been engaging with your teachers? And I mean, obviously you can't go into schools. The schools are closed. So what have you been doing to stay in front of your teachers?
I use my phone a lot. My phone is off the hook
Mm.
most of the time. In fact, I forgot to turn it off. I did turn it on silent though, so uh, but we use that a lot. The reps are still involved to some sense. We do a Zoom kind of happy hour sort of thing that we'll
Mm.
do, and try to involve them that way. And then there is still band that happens even though it's happening remotely. So since
Sure.
schools were closed, we were going to band directors' homes and dropping
Wow.
some of that stuff off, as well as those people that wanted something delivered, we delivered to their house now. So we
Okay.
become a home delivery service.
Yeah. You do what you have to do, right?
Yes, you do.
Right. So as we pull out of this last year of unbelievable change in the schools, what kind of challenges do you see as teachers are starting to move a little bit back towards what they used to know before COVID happened? And how will you help them transition into next school year?
I could foresee a lot of parents having issues with going back to school in general, just
Mm,
with the feeling in this geographical area as far as the safety of kids in schools. Again, science doesn't prove that out. I'm not a believer in that. Science proves that kids are one of the safest demographics and that schools are one of the safest places for kids to be. And that, again, science has proven that any outbreaks in schools have actually occurred because it's teacher to teacher transmission as
mm,
opposed to kid transmission. But the media and the what parents see on social media or in the news doesn't relay that science
mm,
accurately always. So the perception is that if you send a kid to school, you're putting them at greater risk for COVID. So I can foresee that band directors are going to continue to have to work in a virtual world in addition to being in an in-person world. We already have schools. For example, my wife teaches band in Washougal, Washington, and she has to teach virtually and in person the same class at the same time.
mm.
So
Like a lot of
she,
the other teachers do, like a second grade teacher would.
right.
Band as well.
Yep.
Hmm. So it's almost like a little bit of a PR campaign is needed to get back to parents that band is safe, orchestra is
Yes.
safe. You can do this, and it's not just good for your student. It's really good for your student. I could see mentally and emotionally, kids really need to get into music again,
I,
just for some of the healing process.
Yeah, I'm anticipating, actually, I'm hoping for and anticipating a renaissance of things like band and
Mm,
orchestra and PE and anything that involves kids being able to be with other kids in a setting that doesn't involve staring at a computer screen sitting in the same chair.
amen.
Let's be realistic. We all got into band or orchestra for the social aspect. No fifth grader said, gosh, when I grow up, I want to play in an orchestra in college. They got in because their friends were in band and orchestra and it was fun. And it was the one class during the day that you had that didn't involve sitting quietly in your chair and not talking and not making noise and not having fun. No kid goes to fifth grade saying, I can't wait for math class so I can sit in front of my math book and scribble in problems.
Right.
They live for recess and lunch and band and orchestra. And I can really foresee, once we get beyond the initial problem of this, I could foresee a real renaissance. And that's what we're shooting for.
Mm. Renaissance. I love that word. It really brings a lot of hope for the arts. That's great. I'm curious. I've heard a few people talk about when school goes back next fall, because there were essentially two grades of kids who didn't have a chance to start band and orchestra. Have you heard anything about that, where there could potentially be two classes starting band and orchestra beginning at the same year?
Yeah, we have several schools that are already discussing the double year. So
Mm.
if they started band in sixth grade, having beginning band in sixth grade and seventh grade. We have a couple that have already put that into place for next year in their scheduling. I think in a lot of ways it's going to revolve around where the band fits in the school prior to COVID. So
Mm.
if your band or orchestra department, I don't want to leave out orchestra just because I'm a band geek. If your band or orchestra already controls the scheduling, then you're going to have a much better shot at having that double year and not
Mm.
missing. So I know schools where kids, there's 50 to 60% of the student body is in band or band and orchestra. In fact, if there's an orchestra program, some schools it's larger. So therefore, whatever the band or orchestra schedule is, all other classes are based upon that and revolve around that. If you're
Yeah.
in one of those settings where you're controlling 50 or 60% of the student body, you're going to have a much easier time of getting a double year.
That makes a lot of sense. And hopefully, ed reps can encourage teachers to encourage their administrators to consider having two beginning classes because of those kids who missed out. And that could create, with that renaissance that you were just talking about, that could create a real boom year, actually, for the back to school season coming up in the fall of 2021.
One of our focuses this year is well, one of my focuses, since I don't have my other two road reps up here yet, but myself and the guy in Eugene, one of our focuses is we're trying to make sure we're contacting principals and school counselors.
Smart.
So
What do you ask them, or what do you talk to them about?
The school counselors or the principals?
Yeah.
We just talked about the viability of the band program and the orchestra program, and how that is not just a function of education, and a very important function of education, that it is core, that arts aren't a sideshow, they're not a separate entity or extracurricular, that they are deemed by the federal government to be core. And they also are the fabric of the school. So especially at a middle school level where you're starting beginners, sports really aren't the fabric of the school that they become in high school, where everybody goes to a game on Friday night,
right,
goes to the football game or has a state championship basketball. It's more of an intramural kind of deal where kids are, they're not even stands on the football fields at most middle schools around here. But the number, if you have 30, 40, 50% of the student body that's going to a band concert, and all those parents, that means you've got 300 kids in your band program and you have an all-in band concert, you have 1,000 community members in a gymnasium.
Right.
And you can't ignore the fact that people walk in and walk out and judge your school based on that. So as a principal or as a school counselor, it behooves you to have the best possible band program you can have.
Have you already started talking to principals and counselors, or is that coming up?
This is something we do on a constant basis anyway. I know all the principals at all the schools that we go to. I'm not as familiar with the counselors. They rotate around a little bit more than the principals do. But for the most part, I know at least passing, hi, how are you? Hi, Fred. Hi, Joe, whatever. All the principals at all the schools that we're at.
Okay.
So this isn't just the donut guy showing up, for donuts with the staff who shows up once every 6 months. They know who I am. They know who we are. They see our vans. And we're a part of what they have going on as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Is your message being well received by your principals?
It is. Although I do have to admit, probably more so in my eyes than in their eyes. I'm sure when they see me coming, when they're trying to figure out how to safely get into schools, and we get 14 complaints from Joe Schlabotnik, the parent, who says that his kid wasn't 6 foot away in the hallway and somebody touched him, and they're dealing with 1,000 things more than they were dealing with before. But we're not being booted out either.
But what a great idea to, number one, have a relationship with the principals, and number two, actually engage with them to be an advocate for all the music programs out there. That's brilliant. Well, it'll be interesting to see this fall. We'll talk again and we'll see how it went. If there are a boom and a renaissance and two grades starting at once, that could be really interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to get into, I know COVID's been dominating our thoughts over the last year, but it's temporary. It will end. And I'd like to talk about kind of the non-COVID job that you do.
Thank you.
Yes, let's move on. So, Phil, in your time as an ed rep, what have you realized is really your number one priority? What's the most important thing to you while you're doing your job?
I would say that the most important thing to me about the job is that the band director can count on the fact that when they need something or when they ask for something, it happens. And it happens when it's supposed to happen or before it's supposed to happen. That is the single most important characteristic. And everything else flows from that.
So do what you say you're going to do.
Under promise and over deliver every time, every day.
That's a great slogan. And do you find that challenging sometimes?
Yes.
What helps you kind of keep on your priority? What helps you make that happen more often?
I'm a fastidious note taker. Everything gets written down, and maybe I'm just an old fart, but I believe in paper. I tried using phones. I tried using apps. I tried using my computer, brought my laptop with me, did all those things, or emails. And it never worked as well as having that paper because the paper never goes away. If I write a list on the phone, by the end of a week, there may be 200 or 300 things on that list. And who scrolls through the notes section on your iPhone down to number 264?
Right.
To see if you did that or not. But I keep everything organized by day. So it's all on paper and then it's organized by day in order of school visit.
All right. And then you reference your writings throughout the week, throughout the day. Great.
I also do call reports, not because my boss has to have them, but because I have to have them. So that when the director calls up and says, where's my such and such that we talked about last week, I can go back to last week and say, well, I dropped it off at the main office at 9:37.
That's interesting. So
this day.
A lot of reps do have to write call reports at the end of the week
and hate them
and do it because their boss told them to, but you don't. You do it because it helps you actually stay organized.
Yes, I backed up. I do my call report during the course of the day. So I don't wait till the end of the day. It's really, I use the notes section of my iPhone. It's almost stupid easy. I log in what time I got there, and then I note what I did with invoice numbers and stuff. So if the office calls and says, Mary Schlabotnik's mom says you didn't deliver the rental, then, I can go back and, the invoice is there, or the customer account number is there. And then I finish it before I leave the parking lot. So at any moment, at any time, my boss could say, what have you done today? And all I would have to do is hit send and designate it as an email, and it could go out. And God forbid, should I wrap myself around a tree somewhere someday, somebody could come behind me and do my route.
Because it's all written down.
It's all written down. And they could go back weeks and weeks and weeks and see what has happened. I also write down what I did, and I write down one personal thing that the director and I talked about in the course of conversation. So my directors think I have this phenomenal memory that I remember that their son was competing for a state golf championship, and I can say, hey, Bob, how did Joe do at the golf tournament last week? And they're totally impressed that I would remember that. But the reality is that I sat in that van before I went into the school. What the hell did I say to Bob? And I'm scrolling through looking for whatever it is that I might have said.
Yeah.
Or he may have said.
So two things that I want to go deeper into. Number one, did you always write things down like this, or is this something you kind of learned throughout the time? If you didn't do it, something went wrong.
No, I've always done that.
Okay.
My whole life, I've been involved in sales at some point or another, in some industry or another. So it was somewhat ingrained in me. And on a personal note, I have Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed in 1997. And so I have to be very regular in how I do things. and I would think it would benefit somebody with or without Parkinson's, but
Sure.
for me, I don't want to trust whether or not I remember something. I want to have it written down so that I know that I got it and I got it done.
Right. Makes sense. So going back to the other thing I wanted to touch on is you write things down about something personal about the teachers. Why do you do that?
Because they're my friends.
Hmm.
I mean, that's really the reason is they're my friends and I want to be able to talk with them about stuff. And you only see them once a week. I mean, the
Right.
reality is my life, being a road rep isn't a job, it's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I hire other reps. That's how I hire my reps, is that they have to realize that this is a lifestyle. This isn't getting up at 8 in the morning and you get in your van and you're done at 3 in the afternoon and you're done. That's not how this works. If you want to really be successful at what we do and not just be the UPS guy in a music truck. So
Right.
we have a lifestyle and they're my friends. I mean, I just like the band and orchestra directors that I get to see. And I only get to see them 30 times a year for maybe 5 minutes,
Hmm.
6 minutes. So
Hmm.
I only get 3 hours with them in a whole year. And there's 300 of them.
Wow. Right. You have a lot of friends then.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time.
Right. Let's talk about that. I mean, you didn't become friends the first day you met them. How did you build those relationships over time? And what kind of thought process do you go through to go from, at some point you met them first. It was a maybe not a cold call, but kind of the start of the relationship. How do you build it over time?
The first thing is regularity. You have to be on time and you have to be regular. When you say directors should be able to set their watch by when you show up every
Hmm.
week. I had directors when I was on the road full time, 5 days a week, and it was just me seeing almost 200. In fact, it was at my peak by myself, it was 212 schools a week,
Wow.
spread over hundreds of square miles.
Amazing.
And I had directors that if I wasn't there within 20 minutes when I normally was, they were calling the phone to ask if I was in a wreck.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, they were worried about you.
You could set your watch by when, and with that many schools, obviously you can't plan your day so that you hit everybody's planning period. So
Hmm.
they actually on Tuesday, those directors on the Oregon coast, they planned their day on Tuesday around when I would show up. So they knew there was going to be a block of between 5 and 10 minutes that Phil was going to show up in the middle of wind ensemble. And they're scheduling their class around that. So when you don't show up on time, or when you don't deliver what you say you're going to deliver, again, that under promise, over deliver.
Hmm.
Directors believe that when they tell me something, it's going to happen.
They trust you that it'll happen.
Right. So when you do that, then you establish friends. That's what builds friendship and relationships, is trust and contact.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you do during your visits and continue to do now to keep that relationship strong and building? So you show up on time and they know that you'll be there. What else?
The conversation is always about them, not about me.
Hmm.
So I don't ever talk. In fact, I didn't go out publicly with my Parkinson's for over 10 years.
Wow.
And nobody knew I had it. So, I mean, it's, and I don't say that as a point of pride. I just, the goal of your conversation with the director should always be about what's happening with the director, not that's why you're there. They're my friends, so they care about me. But the reality is, when they're standing on the podium, if they're going to take time away from their day and their rehearsal to step down to talk to me, and a lot of times I would just say, don't step down. I don't really have anything for you this week. You don't have anything for me, but I love watching you teach. Could you just send me out with some good music? And that would, whether it's fifth grade band and they were playing page 5 out of, Standard of Excellence, or whether it's a wind ensemble,
Right.
and they're working on Maslenka or something.
So you show up on time, you ask them about them. Can you think about maybe a couple of instances where you wowed them with something else. This over promise, sorry, under
Under
promise,
promise,
over
over deliver.
deliver. Can you think
So
of a couple
again,
instances?
sure, there's several, but I'll narrow it down. It comes down to, again, being a lifestyle and not. So I've had directors that'll text me because they think of something, they don't write it down. So it's 11:30 at night and they're thinking about something, and they're watching TV and something strikes them, and they text me, and I just text them back. If I'm up, I text them back. And I had one say, "Why are you texting me? It's almost midnight." Well, you texted first. It was, so, but the other thing is that there are times, and it's hard on your family, and it's hard on your personal life sometimes, but that clarinet goes down right before the concert, and I live in Battleground, Washington, and it's 2 3/4 hours to Tillamook, Oregon. And I'll run down a step up clarinet, the wind ensemble clarinet player. His clarinet went down. It's 4 o'clock at night, and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Band director calls up and says, I don't know what to do. Maybe you can walk me through a repair or something. But this kid's R13 went down, and we got a concert, and it's going to qualify us or not qualify us for state. And so I couldn't figure it out over the phone in 5 minutes. So I drove to the store, picked up an R13, put it on approval to myself, brought it out to the school, swapped the horns at about 6:45, 15 minutes before the concert, stayed for the first song, and then drove home.
Wow. That's amazing. What's a lasting effect of doing something like that for that teacher?
That teacher will never have another music store ever come to their band room ever. And those parents will tell every parent in 100 miles to get their instrument from us.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
amazing.
cool, right? It's loyalty.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you get someone that loyal, that's gold, right? It's great. So something that you mentioned earlier was you don't go where you're not invited. How do you get invited?
By under promising and over delivering everywhere you go. So I've had middle school directors. I mean, we have places where we're in maybe 1 or 2 schools of the district.
Okay.
So the band director world, the orchestra director world, is an incredibly small, contained universe.
Right.
And they all talk to each other. And so, all it takes is one of those instances where the snare drum head gets blown out by the middle schooler, and you run a new one over the night of the concert, and they're sitting around at their PLC meetings, or they're sitting around at the music educators conferences or whatever. And they'll say, yeah, this happened. And dude, Phil showed up with the drum head. And all I did was post on Facebook how crappy it was that we just blew one of our snare drums out.
Wow.
And so they talk, and so I have directors that will take me over to another director. I had a middle school director that liked us so much that he took us over to the Oregon Music Educators. He took us over to all the other directors, and he said, "This is who you're using now."
Amazing.
And it took a while to get there, but
sure. It sounds like word of mouth is really powerful for you then in your growth.
Yeah.
So obviously, you just talking about those numbers of teachers you service now, that's incredible. How do you structure your day, in your week, in your month to make sure that you're providing the service you want to provide to this vast region that you service?
So the first things that you have to look at are the things that can't be altered. So when you're looking at building your day, building your week, building your schedule, what is the first thing that can't be altered? And that is the school day. You can see teachers outside of the school day, but the school day isn't going to be altered. So your day, you have to be at your first school by 0 period of that day.
Before school starts.
Well, yeah, when the teacher gets there. So if school starts at 8 and they have jazz band at 7, you need to be at your first school a half hour before 7 so that you can touch base. So that's the start of your day.
Okay.
And everything that you need to get going. And I've set things up for my reps so that they can load the previous night. So they leave from home.
Okay.
So the previous night they've already loaded up. They've been trained as to how to load their vans, everything, the minutest detail, so that you don't miss something.
Hmm.
How you load a van is just as important as what you put in it.
Good tip.
So
So as you're driving your route, your van's loaded appropriately, it sounds like.
correct, loaded in the order of everything that's going to have, and you have your pickup sheets where parents have requested pickups, or if you have to stop and ask somebody, hey, you need to update your card or whatever, all that's in the order in which you're going to do it.
Hmm.
Those days are then established at the beginning of the year with the teachers.
Okay.
As much as possible, we try to organize our day so that the teacher is the least bothered possible. But obviously, if you're seeing on average 16 to 17 schools a day,
Hmm.
you can't catch everybody's zero period, especially when you're dry hauling 2 hours to your first school and dry hauling 2 hours back.
Wow. Right. Right.
So if you have a route at the coast and your first school is 2 hours away from your home, and their zero period starts at 7 and you have to be there at 6:30, that means you're on the road in your van driving at 4:30 in the morning.
Good to be a morning person then.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And you'll get home about 3 in the afternoon, and that's a long day.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
a long day. But there's other days where, your first stop might be 8 and you might be done at 1.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know,
So do you try to get a certain number of schools in per day, or is it more about a geographic region and just making sure
it's
you're
a
getting all the schools in for that region?
it's a geographic region, and then I set the routes up so that if you miss a school, there's another day you're going to be right close to that school somewhere. And the reps are set up by geographic region as well. So your Wednesday and your Thursday might almost overlap, so that if something happened, the emergency repair that has to be back the next day or whatever, you miss something, you misplace it in the van, and you get home, it's like, oh crap,
Hmm.
gotta, um, you're close to there within the next day or so.
Okay. Yeah, that's smart. So you can follow up on some of those things you
Mhm.
just mentioned. That makes sense. So when you're out there visiting your various schools, do you see them every week? Do you see some every week? You see some every 2 weeks? Do you see some every month? How does that work out?
When we're at full strength, every school, every week, no exceptions,
Wow.
whether they have business for us or don't have business for us. And
That's a
and
commitment.
yeah, because we're part of their lives. And when they need that thing, it's like, how did you get that $375,000 bid that didn't even go to bid? They just gave it to you.
Hmm.
Well, because I mean, the best thing a director can say is, I'm one of the smallest schools on his route, and he sees me every week and treats me like I'm one of the biggest schools.
Hmm. That says a lot right there.
Someday that director is going to go somewhere else.
Right. Amongst the schools you visit, are you visiting both band and orchestra?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of percentage do you think is band versus orchestra? How big is orchestra in your territory?
In our region, orchestra is probably about 25% the size of band. There's many school
Hmm.
districts don't have an orchestra.
Okay.
The ones that do, the better populated orchestras are the ones that start a year ahead of band.
Hmm. I see.
Generally, what we see is that if orchestra and band start the same year, that band wins out. Don't ask me why that is. Maybe the kids just think it's sexier or whatever. I don't know. I'm a
Sure.
clarinet player by trade, by training. So I love playing in orchestras. But I do find that when orchestra starts in fourth grade and band starts in fifth grade, or fifth and then sixth, that orchestras generally are much larger than bands.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like that's kind of the case across the country. In each region of the country, it's very different with the percentage of band versus orchestra. I was a school rep in Utah, and I think almost every school had an orchestra. Then you look at other regions, and it's an exception. Maybe 5-10% of the schools have an orchestra. So when you're out there and you're visiting band teachers and you're visiting orchestra teachers, do you find that their needs are different?
Yes, without a doubt. And their personalities are different too. And you have to treat them differently. You have to treat most of us, I would say, most of us that are in the rep world deal mostly with bands. I would say that's probably a pretty fair assumption, other than regions that are highly urban and highly educated. Those tend to have more orchestras. Orchestra directors, they want to be talked to a little differently than band directors.
How so?
I know it's a caricature almost, and maybe it's not fair, but orchestra directors are a little more standoffish. And they're not the punch you in the arm, put you in a headlock and rub the top of your head that a lot of band directors are. They and I don't know if it's a chicken and the egg argument for me. Did the orchestra draw that type of personality, or did the orchestra create that type of personality?
Good question that may never be answered.
But I would say that if you talk to most reps, you would find the same thing. Orchestra directors in general are a lot more picky. And that comes down to not just how they're treated, but also the instruments and what they prefer in the instruments. So for a step-up night, for example, I can pretty much have a standard slate of instruments, intermediate, and a standard slate of instruments that are professional. It doesn't work so well with orchestra directors because this kind of instrument may not have gold screws in the Whitner tailpieces, and gold screws are very important to that director. Whereas a band director, if the clarinet has gold posts or doesn't have gold posts, is it in tune? Does it play well as it would? Does it perform in a better fashion than the plastic clarinet that they're currently playing does? And is it repped by a reputable store, and is it made by a reputable manufacturer? And those are really the only qualifications. We get into everything with orchestra directors, the purfling and the color of the screws and the fine tuners and the everything.
So you find they're a little more particular.
Yes.
About the instruments.
Yes. And that's okay. That's their world.
Sure.
I just want to be a part of their world. So if that's what they want, that's what they'll have. And I don't quibble about it, and I don't roll my eyes about it or make fun of them, that's just who they are, and everybody's different. And we if we're going to be successful as a business, we need to accept that everybody's different. And if that's a type of personality that gravitates towards that, then we choose not to ally ourselves with that and not to respect that, then we're virtually guaranteeing to lose a large segment of business.
Yeah, good point. A lot of reps I've talked to throughout the country find working with string players and string teachers particularly challenging because they're not a string player. And if you survey all of the reps across the country, probably about 95% of them are band people.
Yes. Band
players, percussion, maybe even guitar and keyboard. It's really common. But it sounds like you do pretty well with the orchestra teachers. Can you give me an example of something that you do with a string teacher, or a way that you approach them personality-wise versus a band teacher?
I would say that in general, I offer far less in the way of suggestions and mostly just do what I'm told with orchestra directors. And part of that has to do with the fact that I'm so comfortable in the band world, and that we have so many more band programs than orchestra programs. And so when I'm listening to a band program, and if I hear something or see something that I think maybe I could help a little bit with, I'll draw on somebody else, a well-respected band director, and I'll say, hey, I watched this guy do this in this piece. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but I would never do that with an orchestra person. But first of all, even with a band person, I would never say that that's what I want. They're far more educated in music education than I am. I'm around music education. I have a performance degree, but I'm not an educator, and I don't presume to be or tell them things that I think they should do, because A, they don't want to hear it, and B, I'm not qualified to do it. I'm even more away from that with orchestra directors, because I honestly, and Shane, I've even had you help me, and I'm still not comfortable in the string world. I mean, I play a violin and it sounds like two cats fighting badly. It's just, it just doesn't, I just can't. It's not that I can't, I'm not taking the time to do it. I'm sure I probably could, but I'm so uncomfortable with it
Hmm.
that I don't, and I don't want that to translate into how I talk to them and how I deal with them. People can pick up when you're that uncomfortable. So I try
Sure.
not to walk into the world where I'm going to be uncomfortable. And I deal with them on a personal level as opposed to helping them with intonation or with anything else. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah. So you're still friends with the
absolutely.
orchestra teachers like you are the band teachers, and
Oh
even though
yeah.
you don't play.
Yep. And
Okay.
at music educators conferences, I'll buy them a drink. We'll sit down and laugh and shoot the breeze and tell stories about what stupid junior high kids do. And, and all that'll happen with orchestra directors just as well as band directors. But I'm far more different in the orchestra room than
Hmm.
I am in the band room.
Okay. It also sounds like you're very honest with yourself and with the teachers that that's just not the world you live in as much, and
Yes.
you you do what they ask and you do
Yes.
it well. Yeah. Great advice. You mentioned a bit ago when you're doing step up sales with teachers, with string teachers. This is something you do for band and orchestra, correct?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some tips to be successful selling step ups out in the schools? In some ed reps across the country, they're not very involved with step ups. Maybe most of the step ups are sold in the store, but you do what it sounds like a lot out in the schools doing step up sales. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, about 95% of our step up instrument sales. And by step up instruments, I'm classifying anything that's an intermediate or a professional level instrument.
Okay.
95% of our sales are done in a school setting,
Oh,
inside the school. Very few people come to the store because if they do, in my mind and how I train my reps, if people are coming to the store, that means you didn't do your job.
hmm.
So that's not as true for the district that's right that our store sits inside.
Sure.
But if your band directors sent their kid from Seaside, Oregon, 2.5 hours away to the store, that means that the band director didn't feel that you could bring it to them.
Hmm. Good point.
And if that's the case, why would they drive 2.5 hours to come to my store when they passed 4 stores on the way that sell the exact same product that I have
Sure. Sure.
and probably sell it for the same price?
And the teachers like the service that you're doing, bringing step ups out
Absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the it's going to be a different world for us coming up.
Hmm.
And I'm still trying to pivot and see how that's going to work. In the past, there's no secret. I'm not revealing industry secrets or trade secrets, or, I mean, you bring a set of horns and you get a whole bunch of puppy dog sales, we call them. The horns show up and the kids are playing them and they use their own mouthpieces and they're sending them. The clarinet players all get to play a wood clarinet. Oh my gosh, mom, I gotta, and they sign up for an appointment. They bring the instrument home after they sign up and the parent gets to hear them. And we try to keep it as simple as possible. I was a
Hmm.
parent, and granted, I still am a parent. I guess I was a parent. I still am a parent. My kid's now studying for his master's in trumpet, but
Great.
but I was a purchaser of a step up instrument at some point. And while I had the advantage of knowing the instruments and being at a music store and being able to talk to the manufacturers, I always try to keep in mind that most parents view a music store experience either remotely in their school or at the store the same way that I view going to a car lot to buy a car. I'm going to go somewhere and somebody is going to force me or
Hmm.
try to force me to buy more than I need, spend more than I have, and justify it by saying that my kid has to have it. Now, all or none of that may be true. We obviously want to make a sale. That's how we survive, is we
Sure.
make sales. So we do want to sell them something. We do want to sell them the best that they can afford. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you should always buy the best that you can. My grandfather always told me, spend all the money that you have on a good vacuum, a good washing machine, and a good bed.
Wise man.
And 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 those things, I mean, that always stuck with me. But at the same time, you're talking about your child that you're investing your whole life in.
Hmm.
If you can afford a $2,000 clarinet, you should get a $2,000 clarinet. And that will pay off not just for your child, but if the time ever comes, God forbid, that they give up music, that clarinet will then be more resaleable than the less expensive Mozart spelled with an S, but it's brand new, so it must be a step up.
That's good.
Um, so I always try to make sure that parents feel welcome and that they understand that I'm approaching this from their viewpoint. I know
Hmm.
I always thank them. I always, when they come in for their appointments, I tell them, and the band director's sitting right there. I always make sure the band director is right there at the appointment with
Hmm.
me. And the band director is always nodding and kibitzing at the same time. And I always make sure that I thank them for coming, for giving up a part of their evening. I compliment their child, and I do that in front of them and their band director. And I'll say, obviously, Johnny is doing very well in band. Isn't that right, Joe? And the band director will say, yes, because your band director would not recommend that he be here and he be here if this weren't something that your band director, who sees that child every day, he sees Johnny every day, and he thinks that this is going to be good for him. Now, Johnny,
Hmm.
did you like that instrument? And then I let the kid do the rest of it.
Hmm.
And by the time we're done, and every appointment's 20 minutes, by the time we're 10 minutes into it, we're talking about how can we do this?
Hmm.
And we're very flexible. We're a family-run company, so we can pivot pretty easily. We carry third-party financing. We're not a bank. I always tell people all the time, every presentation is we're a fabulous music store and we're a crappy bank. So we don't, but if push came to shove and you're a good renter, which is one of then we'll carry you because you made your payments on your rental. We'll carry you with this too.
Hmm. And you have good success at this system?
Yes, we close. I would say in pre-COVID times, again, it's going to change. In pre-COVID times, we close about, if they had an appointment, it was a 90% close rate.
Wow. That's remarkable.
So as long as they had the appointment, the parent was committed to show up. And the director, the other thing is the director has to do their job. This is an opportunity to purchase an instrument. The kids already played it for 2 weeks. They shouldn't need to take it home and play it. They've had it for 2 weeks. It's been in
Hmm.
the room. The parents have already heard about it. Most of them have already called the director and said, what the heck is going on here? You brought on this newfangled trumpet thing. It's shaped like the other trumpet. Why should I bother?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that conversation has already happened
Okay.
in a successful step-up night.
Is this a hard sell for the teachers you're doing this with? Maybe for the first time they've done it. Do you get any pushback when you offer this idea?
Yes. Yeah. It's we've done it enough in this region that I have a list of directors who do it well. Obviously, I don't
Hmm.
refer to directors who haven't done it well
Sure.
or who aren't enthusiastic about it, but I have a pretty long list of directors in their area close to them. And because I know all the directors, I know who's friends with who. So I could say, hey, you need to go talk to Noelle about this because
Hmm.
you know how good her band sounded? Look in her band, and there may be 5 instruments that aren't step-up instruments. And if you think that doesn't make a difference, you're kidding yourself. So go talk to her, see how easy it is to do. We make it easy for you to do, and see
Hmm.
if just give it a try.
So word of mouth again.
Yes.
Word of mouth. Good. Good tip. So if you were to go back to right when you started as an ed rep, you know so much more now than when you started. Go back in time to younger Phil Hodapp, and what would you tell young Phil Hodapp, who was just starting out, that what did you wish you knew then that you know now?
That's a hard question, actually. I anticipated that question, and now that you've actually asked it, I'm struggling with the answer because, in a sense, the answer conflicts with something that's a basic tenet of what I view as life on the road, life through the windshield, and that is that this is a lifestyle and not a job. And when I first started, I worked 20 hours a day.
Ooh. Wow.
And it about killed me. And I kept that up for almost 10 years.
How?
I slept between 1 and 5.
Amazing.
1 a.m. and 5 a.m. because I would be on the road. All that I would be on the road till I'd get home at 9, maybe 8 or 9. And then of course you have emails and texts and everything that's come in during the day and orders to place and things to organize. And I would go to bed about 1. And then I would get up at 5 and do it over again.
It takes some energy.
I would say don't do that. So then
most probably physically couldn't do that.
there's a balance between that. You know, some people will say, you know, work-life balance, but and that's important. But if you have too much on the quote life side, eventually you don't have work.
Good point.
You know, I told my kid always work first, play second. And I would say that if I had to give young me advice, it would be play more. You'll be a happier person and a happier rep, and people will want to be around you more. When you walk into the band room, if you walk into a band room or an orchestra room and they say, wow, you look beat, dude, you probably aren't doing it right.
Did you hit a point where you just burned out?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So you hit reset and changed your schedule a little bit.
Yep.
Good. That's probably why you continued another 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. So if you're a new ed rep, and you do have new ed reps start there at Beacock, and you need to train them, what's, I guess, some of the first things you tell them about how to be successful at this job?
The first thing I tell them, again, I've said it probably a dozen times already, this is a lifestyle. It's not a job. So if what you want is a job, go work inside the store, because you'll have a schedule, and when you're off, you're off. You know, if you're working noon to close, when close comes, you're off. On the road, you're not off, because the phone's going to ding, you're going to get a text, you're going to get this, Phil's going to call you and ask if you did that. I mean, so just know that's going to happen and roll with it. Work extremely hard. I would tell them work extremely hard and train them to work really hard when you're working. And then when you're not working, take that time for you. So that you can be refreshed. You know, the old 7 habits of a highly effective person, you know, sharpen the saw. You do have to sharpen the saw. I train them that we have very busy seasons and we have very not busy seasons. So for example, rental season from the middle of August until we're done with rentals. The actual last rental night is probably the last week of September. We might have one in October, but the reality is by the time you get done with mop up and clean up and exchanges and the family that forgot to rent theirs, we're really not on the road again until the middle of October. So from the middle of August to the middle of October, you have no life. You know, but don't answer your phone on Saturday. You know, Sunday you have to prep for Monday. Take Saturday and do nothing but what you want to do. But other than that, you're going to be busy from early in the morning till you get home from that rental night at midnight after you drove 2 hours. And that's your life. Step up season, you schedule your own step up season with your directors. So you choose how busy you're going to be, but you are going to be busy. At the same time, I make sure that they are protected by me and from me at times like Christmas break. When schools are off at Christmas, I don't expect to hear from them, and I don't expect to see them at the store. I don't make them do things. They don't have to go in and do inventory. They don't have to that because they've already done 2 jazz festivals. You know, so they've been busy for a whole weekend, plus they did the rental nights, plus spring break comes. If you're a Washington rep and it's Washington spring break, dude, I don't want to hear from you. And it's not vacation time that you're charged. I just flat don't want to hear from you.
Hmm.
When school's out, when we picked up the last summer repair, there's about a 3.5, 4 week period from July 5th until the first week of August or so. There's like a 3.5 week period right there. All I want to hear from you is that you're checking in.
Hmm.
You know, you just kind of check in, check the shelves, make sure there's nothing weird. If they got done with their school repair early, a set of repairs, get that out and get it delivered. But when it's time to work, it's time to work. And I don't want to hear about how tired you are. And I don't want to hear about anything else. Get your buns in the van, get going, because this is why other people have to take vacation over Christmas. And who in the retail world gets Christmas season off?
Right.
But
right.
You do.
So it sounds like you want them to work very hard when it's time to work, but you also protect them from burning out. Maybe something you learned from what we were just talking about.
I do my best.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but I do my best. But it is something you have to choose. This isn't a regular job.
After these years of being an ed rep, Phil, what keeps you motivated every day to get up and keep doing this?
Because these are my friends. I don't want to live a solitary life.
Sure.
I live out here in the country and battleground. I can only mow the lawn so many times. How much, no gardens growing right now.
Yeah.
But for 20 plus years, 22 years now, 22 years, 23 years, I've wrapped my life around my friends. And so it would be like giving up my family.
Yeah. It's not a bad day when you get up and hang out with your friends. Yeah. That sounds all right.
Yeah.
Before we go, Phil, do you have any last thoughts that you think would help an ed rep out there who's maybe new to the job, and a little tip that you think might give them a little wisdom?
I would say, other than what we've already talked about, things like write it down and all the stuff that we've already talked about, I would say the other thing is develop a thick skin. So you're gonna get hurt. Director's not gonna appreciate. You may have moved heaven and earth for a director, and they're not gonna appreciate it when they need something else. And you're gonna think, Jiminy Christmas, dude. I mean, drove a freaking drumhead out there for your stupid concert, and now you're gonna bust my buns because this online company is 13 cents cheaper on a reed. So you're gonna not buy these other things from me because so just develop a thick skin. And that would be number one. And number two, along with that, would be, what a band director tells you is always private between you and the band director. Never, ever, ever. And I hear reps say that they enjoy being the fount of knowledge that other directors, hey, what's happening with so-and-so? I never tell directors that. Never, ever, ever, ever violate that confidence. If you want to be, would you want a friend that the minute you told them something, you didn't know who else was going to hear about it? I wouldn't want that kind of friend. So directors know that, if there's a job opening and there's a director that would be great for the job and would be great for me to have them in the job. Let's be honest. I would say, hey, if you're looking to go, I may have some place for you. Talk to me when I can be a little more public, if I know something's going on or whatever. But again, I never violate the confidence of a director ever. Ever. And in my years, I've served, for example, husband and wife band directors that were at different schools that got divorced, and it was an ugly divorce. And I'm at her school, and then 2 schools later, I'm at his school, and I mean, they knew that if she told me something, it would never get back to him. And if he told me something, it would never get back to her, because they knew that what they told me was in the strictest of confidences always. And it was never to be shared, not even with my family. I would never even come home and do it.
That's at the level of like a patient doctor privilege kind of confidence.
I mean, band directors and orchestra directors, they live in their own world in the school, and you were a rep, Shane, so you understand. I mean, they actually almost have a complex, about how nobody loves me, everybody hates me. They're kind of off in their own little world, and nobody understands what I do. So they can't go talk to the English teacher about how awful their band experience is right now because the principal's not honoring this or doing that, or this is going wrong, or that rotten parent accosted them after a concert, but they can talk to me about it because I'm in their world and I understand it, but then I'm going to leave. So there's no real repercussions. They don't have to look at me the next day and think, I wonder what they're thinking about me now. Now that I spilled my guts, and so, I mean, band directors and orchestra directors, they need that kind of confessional thing. That's part of your job if you're going to be a part of their lives, but you can't violate it.
Otherwise they'll stop sharing things with you and you'll stop being friends, just like anybody else, right?
The minute they're not your friends, the minute you're not the trusted advisor, the minute you're not their friend, that is the minute that you will start seeing the online catalogs, they don't have catalogs anymore, but the package show up from the online company, or suddenly you drive up to the school and there's that other company's van there. Because everybody can deliver a package. I could operate a package delivery service out of my garage right now if I wanted.
Right.
Anybody can deliver a package. Not everybody can be your friend.
Phil, those are incredible words of wisdom. And we so appreciate your time and your willingness to share all of what you just shared. And it's going to be incredibly valuable for reps really of any experience level, I think, whether you're just starting out or you've been on the road for 20 years. I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff in there you can glean from. Phil, thanks again. So appreciated. And I'm sure we'll talk again.
All right. You're very welcome, Shade. And I hope that something I said helps somebody somewhere. I'm honored that you would call me.
We hope you found the information in this episode useful and something you can use in your everyday life as an ed rep. If there is a topic you'd like to learn more about and have presented on a future episode of Ed Rep Radio, or you'd like to give us some feedback in general, please email us at edrepradio@eastmanstrings.com. To learn more about Eastman Music Company, go to our website, eastmanmusiccompany.com, or give your Eastman rep a call. Thanks, and drive safe.